Yes, you guys are picked up. We're live.
I'm ready.
All right. Good afternoon to everybody on Zoom and in the room here. We're joined by a couple of the town councilors and by this inaugural iteration of the Town Manlius Board of Ethics. This is a workshop session. This is not a public meeting. This is just an opportunity for the Board of Ethics to provide an update to the town board on its activities, what we've got planned for the year, and to just get everybody up to speed on what we've done so far. With that, I would like to go ahead and look through a minor presentation we have, which we will interrupt routinely for discussion and presentation. So first of all, just I'd like to allow the board members to introduce themselves. And let's start to my left with Mr. Raffle.
My name is Larry Rayful. I appreciate being selected for the board. It's very honored in my retirement to do something for the town of Manlius. I taught legal ethics in 3 different law schools for 41 years, besides being a dean of 2 law schools. And I've lectured to state bar groups on ethics, and I've also been, for a number of years when we lived in Long Island, I was a member of the Board of Ethics of the town of Iceland for many years.
That's where I used to live.
Really? You live in Iceland?
I lived in Iceland.
Lovely place, yeah.
Yeah, small world.
Yep, absolutely.
So wonderful, thank you. And to my immediate left, Christine, go ahead.
Hi there, I'm Christine Kinsella Zettler, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I don't have the long list of things that I've done with ethics. I'm a
You're
little
not old.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I do interact with ethical situations every single day, and I feel like being new at this, I'm walking through this in a way that I think is valuable because I'm learning. So I just want to say I'm just really glad to be here, and I do have a little something prepared. Can I?
Hold it for next.
All right, you go ahead.
And last but not least, I'm William Nicholson. I'm one of the town board members here in the town of Manlius. And just for full disclosure, by day, I do also work as a community action director, where we address the causes and conditions of poverty in communities across the United States and here locally. And also present is John Deere, our town supervisor, and Ingrid Gonzalez McCurdy, one of the town board members. So after brief introductions, I did want to hand this back to Christine for some opening thoughts.
Thank you. So this is my first foray into anything governmental. So I just want to say, I really do want to thank you for the opportunity. It's a really big deal for me. And I just want to take a brief moment to highlight something that I think is really important. And that is that it's my understanding, and I think I'm correct, that our town has never had a board of ethics ever before. So I think it's a really big deal that the current seated board has done something this meaningful and for the first time. So I just want to point that out because I think it's important that anyone who would be watching could know that this was initiated by the town board. And I feel like that's really special. Creating a space for an ethics board to support this important work of governance is critically important, not only to navigate complex ethical challenges, but to communicate to us as citizens that governmental ethics is important to this board and to the people working here, and also that issues will be discussed openly and transparency and integrity are being actively strived for in our town government. And a town that talks about ethics openly is a town that values integrity, in my opinion. And adding an organized body to assist in these conversations creates clarity and builds trust. So I really appreciate being a part of this. It's something that is true to my values. And so thank you so much for doing that. And that's it. And on to the actual details of what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you, and please, I know, so Counselor Bollinger is online, I'm told also, so please, um, anybody in the room and on Zoom, feel free to interrupt and ask questions if necessary. All right, we don't have, this is not a rote presentation, these are just prompts to kind of highlight where we're at, where we're going, and
So thank you to the three of you for starting this work, because it's much more work when you're starting from scratch.
Right.
So thank you for that.
so there was I will provide a little bit of, as we mentioned on the first slide, established in January 2025, which is pretty recent. Observing eyes might note. So questions that came to the board at various points, whether in public hearings or open podium, kind of suggesting that a board of ethics should look at certain things and why isn't the board of management looking into that and why not? And those questions really sort of lit a fire on this board's behalf to say, well, there's no good reason. But I do want to highlight sort of what the enabling local law says. So powers and duties of a board of ethics, this is our town law here, section 4 or 5. Hereby establish the board of ethics consisting of 3 members to be appointed by the town board, all of whom reside in the town and who shall serve without compensation at the pleasure of the town board. Now, it's interesting that this has been part of town code for some time because the grounding in state law is clear. That is some fine print. I recognize that, but I did want to just draw attention to the fact that we are taking on a responsibility to populate the town's board of ethics, even though it's not absolutely required. We're a town of less than 50,000 population, and a county, we are theoretically, captured by a county's board of ethics to review anything that we might have under consideration. So we are opting to convene a board of ethics for the town. We're not mandated to, yes.
Yeah.
So again, board of ethics has the powers and duties prescribed by Article 18 of the General Municipal Law, which has been our Bible and our considerations. And let's see. That's the only thing to look at the screen about. Yeah, okay, so I won't read the fine print out loud, but essentially it just kind of spells out in more detail what our code actually includes and says. So I personally, as a voting town board member, felt compelled to do something about this lack of a board of ethics simply because it was in our code. Why aren't we delivering on what we have promised to the people in both our fiduciary role and just our general representative role? So what we here as your board of ethics have taken on first is really the most significant section of board of ethics responsibility, which is to be the generator, proprietor, and manager of the financial disclosures process. And so that's predominantly what we'll be talking about today, because that's really the bulk of what we are engrossed with right now. I will say the town also has a corresponding code of ethics for all covered individuals to abide by. And I do want to say, for the record, both personally and as a member of this board and a person present, this code of ethics and law has been prominently posted in this room forever. It's right there. So,
Right.
all right. So with that being said, I want to hand it over to Larry for a moment, just for a brief discussion, or as lengthy of a discussion as we would like to have, on really what is the point and purpose of financial disclosures.
Okay.
So my role or my duty as assigned was to do a quick survey of best practices. And I did some Google searches and looked to see what other towns, larger and smaller than Manlius, were doing. And wanted to see if everybody was sort of on the same page. And the best practices seem to be this disclosure statement. Now, I know at the outset, I'm sure I speak for most residents of the town or most employees of the city, that term is a little bit scary, right? It's a little bit suspicious. Disclosure. the millions of dollars I have in my account in offshore down in the Caymans, yeah, we're not looking for that really. But, so it's not a great term. I've never loved the term, but that's, the disclosure statement is the best practice and the form that we've come up with. And what we plan to do with the board's approval is to do extensive training of members of the board, employees of the town, people who ask questions to make them understand, or make them understand, but help them understand what this form is trying to get at and what it's not trying to get at. What we're concerned about, what most boards of ethics are concerned about, is the nature of undue influence on decision makers at the town level, whether it's cognizant in the forefront, or even without really knowing that that's an undue influence. And so this protocol, using a form, seems to be the best practice of it. At the outset, the most important thing that we can convey to the board, that we can promise to the board, and we can promise to every employee of this town, is that these forms are absolutely confidential. They will remain confidential, and the only three of us will review it. And it won't be spread across newspapers or TV or so forth. And I think that we can convey this, how serious we are, and the integrity that we believe that we have, that these forms will stay confidential.
Yeah, Larry, you made a good point the other day too about, with respect to the decision makers, that essentially this is a tool that ultimately protects decision makers. It protects the integrity of their decision making with a documentable trail of connections.
So let me stop there, and I'll come back to the process in a minute. But that's why we proposed this form that you will see, and we've kept it fairly straightforward. And we'll go through that.
Sure. Yeah, we metabolized a lot of options. We went from brutally simple to painfully ornate, and kind of came down on the simpler side, particularly as we're introducing. We figured there would be a new, introducing something like that will no doubt generate interest, discussion, and perhaps questions and conflict over the rollout. So we want to start simple, which I guess we can go in or out of any order you like.
Let's talk about the form real quick,
Yeah,
just to
let's just-
highlight the fact, what we're concerned about is property business associations in the town. And that's sort of the general overview. And a lot of it is people just aren't aware of what that association might be, because in the end, a lot of it involves money. And so contracts to be let, and people to be hired, and decisions to be made. We're also interested in, and this raises people's hackles a little bit, but we also have to ask about your spouse and what they do and what their business is. And so, again, it will all be strictly confidential, but your spouse and your family and your associates and what interactions they may have with the town of Manlius.
Yeah, we had lengthy discussions about covered individuals, who would be covered by this policy, and we had some options first, and we came to a consensus that rather than trying to sort of separate out, who has involvement with contracting, who has interest or involvement with procurement, who we decided, let's rather keep it simple and make it 100% compliance. Every agent representative or elected in the town is covered by this policy. We can do it simply that way.
So just a comment, when I worked for a New York State senator, we went through a training about this, and your form is much simpler. Thank you for that. It's very straightforward and easy to complete. So of
Thank you.
course,
We tried to leave room for complexity in the, there's
Yeah.
always
Right.
plenty of white space to elaborate, you know, should you need to.
Yeah.
Most, like what, Mr. Ruffles would like to say that, you know, 99.99999% of these will be just paper on, you know, in a record and nothing will come of them.
Yeah. We also didn't want it to be an interrogation of people, like, you know, we're just trying to do our due diligence and do our best, you know, with all of it.
So do we, I'm sorry, I interrupted, Larry.
Oh, that's okay. Well, let me just finish with the process. So, our thought is that, we will, we're actually taking on a lot of work.
Yeah.
I wish you would have given us a better board member to work with, but we have William, so.
I'm right
we're
here.
stuck. I guess that's how you sort of got rid of the weak link there, but, we plan to have, you know, all of the people that are named here fill out these forms, and we will review them annually.
Yeah.
And they can be reviewed fairly quickly for most people. We understand that, and we will comment on the places. So our first is the training, explaining the forms. And secondly, I think it seems to me the more important role that our board is playing is not just the form and the collecting of the form, but giving people an option to ask a question if they want to start a new business, or they want to go into business with somebody, or their wife wants to try to get a contract with the highway department, or, you know, can I do this? And just so people can know in advance, well, yeah, that's fine, or yeah, that's a little too close to home. But so the second part of the training, where to ask, and to ask without knowing that I mean, keeping that all confidential. And then thirdly, the forms will be reviewed, and then thanks to Ann Oot, will be kept securely in her office, which we appreciate her willingness to participate in that. Will be kept in, and it'll be an annual function of the board. And our hope is that it will move smoothly from year to year.
Do you guys want me to walk through the policy itself
Let's see.
briefly?
Just probably for the benefit of anybody that's gonna watch this, or you watch the recording of it, if you wanna.
Right.
Yep, the handout, I think that'd be a good idea.
For sure. Forward one. Yes, okay, so again, as Mr. Full stated, this is an annual requirement or within, well, I'll get to that point, but within 30 days of material change also. So
Right.
again, this is, when we speak of the policy, we're referring only to the annual disclosures policy. This board may promulgate other policies in the future around other matters, but at this point in time, this is the only policy that we're developing. Again, with respect to the annual financial disclosure. It will need to be adopted by the board once, you know, finalized and approved, but as it stands today, it's largely molded. And again, I want to state most importantly, the purpose. And the purpose of this policy is to promote transparency, integrity, and public trust in the town of Manlius government by requiring all covered employees, agents, and officials to annually disclose certain interests and relationships which may present actual or perceived conflicts of interest. Now that paragraph will certainly generate ample discussion. So we'll get through the policy first. So applicability, this policy applies to the following individuals: all elected officials in the town of Manlius, all appointed board members and officers, all department heads and supervisory personnel, and all town employees over the age of 18, both permanent and temporary. We had some discussion about that. You know, rec department has temporary staff, highway department has temporary staff. So again, where do we draw the line? We drew it with everyone. And again, It's not a burdensome document. Most of this, that doesn't apply, sign here, there you go. So the annual requirement. Well timed, record.
Right.
All individuals subject to this policy shall complete and submit a disclosure of interest statement each year by January 31st. We're setting a pretty aggressive deadline. So organizational meeting in the first week of January. This board should have its work done by the end of the month or within 30 days of assuming a qualifying position. So again, if there's if you're hired mid-year, it's part of your onboarding. We do. Mary, we're just reviewing the top annual disclosure policy, and we're on to page 2. We're just starting on page 2. So the contents of the disclosure statement, which Mr. Ethel just basically oriented us to, the disclosure statement shall require the reporting of ownership interests in any business, significant partner relations and or children aged 18 and older, any real property interests within the town of Manlius, any outside employment or consulting work that may create a potential conflict of interest, any gifts, services, or gratuities received over $75 in value, or any other financial, business, or personal relationships that may reasonably appear to influence the filer's decisions or actions taken on behalf of the town. That is a fairly weighty and loaded clause, and that will warrant a good amount of discussion and contemplation by this board when the situations which may arise. Part 5, submission and record keeping. The disclosure forms must be submitted to the town manager, who shall maintain a confidential record of all filings in the personnel file of the individual, except as otherwise provided by law, and that's referring to a potential FOIL order. The town manager shall provide completed forms to the Board of Ethics for review upon request. That means if we have received a referral that needs some inquiry, we may go to the town manager to pull disclosure statements first. Number 6, the material change disclosure. So in addition to the annual filing requirement, covered individuals must submit an updated disclosure statement within 30 days of any material change in financial interests, relationships, or outside activities relevant to this policy. For example, any new outside employment. The review and enforcement component, the Board of Ethics shall review all submitted disclosure statements for completeness and potential concerns. If a potential conflict is identified, the Ethics Committee may, that's a board, not a committee. The Ethics Board may request clarification or further information from the filer, issue an advisory opinion, recommend recusal by the filer from certain duties or activities, or refer the matter to the town board for further action. And we note here also that failure to submit a required disclosure or any intentional misrepresentation or omissions within it may result in referral to the town board for disciplinary or legal action, which may lead to sanctions. Point 8, confidentiality. So as Mr. Rafful already stated, disclosure statements shall be kept confidential except as required by law, again, FOIL request, or when access is necessary for review and enforcement by this board. Access is limited to the town manager, the ethics board, and legal counsel as required. Training and acknowledgement. So this is where we here as the newly impaneled Board of Ethics kind of took one for the team and volunteered to provide, again, because we appreciate, in all seriousness, I'm not being flippant here, we understand this is a new body, this is a new phenomenon within the town, and that there may be some time to really sort of absorb the new situation here. So we want to provide ourselves and our time to all covered individuals to provide some perspective, training, and follow through with us directly. So the effective date and review. This policy is effective immediately upon adoption by the town board. It shall be reviewed at least once every 3 years or upon any material change in state law or ethics procedures. So again, what we hear now is we are proposing policy for town board consideration. Any questions on the policy itself for us? Any discussions? And it's a small crowd, so we can take questions.
Yeah. So question, so failure to submit a required disclosure gets referred to the town board. What happens if it is a town board member that has not filed theoretically?
Sure. That seems problematic.
Yeah, yeah.
It's certainly,
Great question.
it is a great question, and it's one that has been asked of me previously. So, this is, again, we want to go back, much like any other service provider, go back to your mission. What is your mission? And our mission here is to, with transparency and integrity, deliver the services that the town, is what's for. So it's certainly, with that hypothetical, would certainly present a scenario that suggests a conflict of interest. That's a perception
Mhm.
problem. And so I think.
And it's a real conflict of interest, right? Because, so does the town board have any stated way of recusing oneself when there is a conflict
Yes.
Sure.
that you have done previously?
Yeah.
It has happened. I mean, we haven't had to compel someone to do it. They voluntarily.
Right,
refuse themselves.
right.
Well, and I think, based off of my understanding of how something like that would be heard by the board, is because it's an employment matter, it would be during an executive session, and it would be incumbent on the town board to not include that member of the board
Nice.
if it's a concern with their file.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think I wanna go probably jumping around a little bit around the agenda, but it seems like a good opportunity to kind of highlight the distinction between what the Board of Ethics is and does and is not and doesn't do. So were we to become aware of that, were we to become aware of an elected person or a council member who's, for whatever reason, just unwilling to sign a financial disclosures form as required, we don't have an enforcement wing. This would be referred
Yeah.
back to the town board, and in a sense, it would be, as the supervisor said, we think you have a personnel problem that you need to deal with
Right.
here.
Right, and
Right.
we can do those 4 things.
Yep,
Right.
these are our 4
Those
things
are
that
our
we can
4
do.
things that we can do. We can write an advisory opinion, we can get it back to you.
Yeah, so is it necessary to state what those steps are in this document? Would that make sense?
Well, I don't know about in sequential order, but which document?
This one.
The policy itself?
Yeah,
Yeah, because
yeah,
specifically the question is about the financial, like what would be the next
Right.
step if a town board member
if that didn't happen,
Didn't.
what's the
Yeah.
next step? Should it be clear?
I think it's the question of, to be, and this is where I think this is somewhat complicated, is that, if a town board member decides not to file it, then what would happen is this board would make an advisory opinion.
Yeah,
to say that
we would write an opinion and make a referral to the board for
it is
action.
unethical to not file, that would be the thing, and remembering that there is not a process or structure in place that if a town board member doesn't file it, it's up to the town board to decide what happens next.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been impaneled to render an advisory opinion on the matter,
right?
and we've done, hypothetically, we've done so. And the result of that is we have a recommendation for the town board to follow through on as a.
Well, when you apply ethics, it can, how many hours of conversation have we all had about one or 2
Right.
things? It's just so we can do all that work and then hand it to you and you can do whatever you need to do, that's just, we know our role, and we're pretty clear about what we can and can't do, so.
And for us, we would handle that like any other person on that.
Gotcha. Yeah, because clearly it has implications if that were to happen, and I think I have my husband's software engineering look for exceptional conditions is rubbing off on me.
Any other comments or questions on this policy
So,
itself?
If I may,
Hi, Sarah.
hi. So this is a fairly common practice within not-for-profit organizations, which I've been affiliated with for several years. And I think the nature, and I know you're planning the training, I think the place where I have observed people become confused is sort of of saying, well, it's my conflict of interest. You don't have a conflict of interest unless an interest comes up. So you're disclosing your business relationships. It does not mean it's a conflict unless the town engages in something that is with that business interest. And so I think it becomes confusing for people to say, why do you need to know these things or whatever? Well, you only need it if you need it, but unless you disclose in advance, I don't know if I need it. And so I think that training is going to be very important for people to understand. This is sort of a baseline, and then when the town goes to make a new business agreement, contract with somebody new, purchase something they haven't purchased before, that we would know to run through everybody, say, does anybody have a relationship with that business who might be making a decision about that?
Well said.
And I think, Larry, you had talked about this, how when you're disclosing and you're doing it across the board ahead of time, this is what I'm involved in, instead of when all of a sudden there's an issue, the perception is maybe if there's an issue, maybe someone would be less inclined to disclose. But ahead of time, if it's just rote, it's just, systematic, then it's just there if you ever need it, and hopefully you don't. Hopefully you never do.
Yeah, and again, setting the stage for actual verifiable transparency, that's the goal. That's right.
Have you looked at any other local models, or the Board of Ethics and Ethics Code?
Yes, we did. We did a lot of comparison of various municipal codes and practices for sure.
Did you look at the Onondaga County Code?
We did. We didn't spend a lot of time on it.
Not a lot of time. I mostly looked at other towns.
Okay. The Onondaga County Code is very well defined. It was promulgated in 1990. A lot of these changes happened in 1991 when there was a change in general municipal law. And I kind of looked at the history of the town, and really, the last change, the last modification of the code was in 1991, which is when municipalities were required by the State Controller's Office to make some changes. And I really don't know the full history and directive that would have come down. But in 1990, the county did put together a code of ethics and guidelines for their ethics board. I have a copy of that if you want to have it.
We're looking at it.
We're looking at it right now.
Okay.
So I'm just, you said a code of conduct for the ethics board, correct?
Right, and the
Okay.
definitions of this too are pretty precise, as to what relationships are.
Yeah. Do you know what article that is in if you're looking at it right now?
Okay, well, the definitions are in Article 2.
Okay.
Yes, so there's a lot of, obviously there's a lot of promulgated code in the county's version. So for us, we considered our options and we looked at the fact that for the town of Manlius, we're implementing something new and we want it to be deliberative about it. We want it to be cautious and not jump off a cliff with a whole new 48-page code. So we envision that with each consecutive month or year of an impaneled Board of Ethics empowered to make recommendations to the town board for code updates, it will grow. It will continue to expand on.
Yeah, I know you're just getting started. The State Controller's Office also has some very good documents.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they
Yes,
do.
they
We
do.
worked
We've
with
studied
those
them.
throughout.
We've gone through that.
Yes,
We-
extensively.
And
Article
there is
19.
one document that's supposed to be, posted in all municipal
It's
facilities. And it's the New York State General Municipal Laws, sections 800 through 809, conflicts of interest of municipal officers and employees.
I know, Mary, I'd love to draw your attention behind your right shoulder. It's right on that bulletin
Okay, so
board.
we've got it up here.
Yeah.
No, I did go through this, and it was kind of interesting to see what the state controller has been requiring, for municipalities.
Yeah, we are very happy and delighted to be full steam ahead, taking this on now and understanding that it will be an evolving process. And, we wanted to start with easily implementable things that we can apply broadly across the whole the whole town operations right away.
Yeah,
This
and
is
if
why
you have any notes or anything you wanna share, you're welcome to share them as we do this, and we'll put them in our packet, so we can figure things out as we go.
I will, I'll send it, over the documents that I have. It's to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions on the policy itself? And again, knowing that this is gonna go to the board for the town attorney did review this as it exists today. So we did get some recommendations from him on this, but it's obviously still open to, or it's still subject to modification.
Oh,
if the
yeah.
board accepts it.
So I have a question also on section 4, the gifts, services, gratuities, $75 in value. I feel like at the Senate it was even lower. How did you come up with the amount? Is that kind of a standard for you?
It is, yeah, in fact, we just, in a previous code update project with the town, that was one of the things that was like, I can't, in code, so.
Yeah.
General code. That was one of the ones we could just say, as a town, make a motion to go ahead and approve these changes, just to get parallel with the current state laws.
Yeah, and Ingrid, I think it went up for the Senate too. It's $75 for everybody now.
Oh, okay, yes. I think it used to be.
You can't get dinner for $35 anymore, so they had to raise it.
So, we're at a point in our agenda here where we can kind of leapfrog around into open discussion as much as we want. There's a few things I want to get in here, but I think it'd be a good opportunity now to just take a quick look through what the town's code, this is town law right here, standards of conduct. So regarding gifts, confidential information, representation before one's own agency, representation before any agency of the town, and then of course E, the disclosure of interest in any legislation. F, investments that are in conflict with official duties, again captured by the disclosure documentation. Private employment, same, captured by the disclosures. And future employment. So this one, we are kind of in a discussion point about how to incorporate this future aspect into our, you'll see an italicized section. I think it is a work in progress here. So not, following the termination of service or employment with the municipality shall not appear before any board of or agency of the town in relation to any case, proceeding, or application in which he personally participated during the period of his service or employment in which was under his active consideration. So these are all things that we've had to incorporate into this policy. And anything moving forward, we'll be reflecting on this as well. We can share this PowerPoint. I mean, this is all just cut and pasted from what's available in the code, so I'll leave it up now. So we wanted to talk a little bit. Have I been talking too much?
No.
Please, what we want to talk about what the board is and what the board is not, and where referrals come from, and where the work of this board comes from. I want to make it really plainly clear to anybody and everybody that this is not a substitute whistleblower provision. This is this Board of Ethics has a very specific role, and its referrals come from the town board. So that may generate some questions and some raised eyebrows, which we're happy to address. But as it is, referrals for investigation by the Board of Ethics shall come from the town board. The public can bring any and all concerns to the town board just as ever. So including any appearance of impropriety, any allegations of real impropriety, these are all still the domain of the town board, who now has this impaneled Board of Ethics to refer to for a little bit for a deeper dive, which we're happy and eager to do. Larry, would you, and the advisory role, again, just kind of wrapping up what the board does and is not. Again, we've touched on it a little bit. Enforcement mechanisms, such as they are really to render advisory opinions and refer back to the board for actual legislative action. The advisory role is, I think, very, very important, and it's something that we'll be able to share. Again, one of the reasons for this meeting today was to sort of walk through some of the advisory opinions that we've already rendered, which were very low hanging fruit, but we're happy to talk about them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think that the other important thing that we emphasize is that all of this is a work in progress. And so we're still walking through all of this. And so things that, the questions that people have here from, you know, the public, the board, anybody, will be very helpful. Because we want to make sure that we're addressing and pulling apart the concerns that maybe we haven't thought of. Cause not every, you know, not every code considers every possibility and not every board can get out their crystal ball, you know, so I really appreciate that. The other question I have is, because that came up for me because I'm wondering what happens to our advisory opinion? Where does it go? Where does it live?
So they go to the town board
Okay,
and
and then what? Oh, it's just, okay, fair enough.
yeah, they may follow and
Okay.
adopt with our recommendations, they may modify them, they might seek, you know, further guidance from us, but it's
Is there any desire to have any publicity or availability of those opinions, like?
I know they went into, they've gone into meeting minutes so far, so what do you guys think?
Well, I mean, an advisory opinion, I think we have to think about the confidentiality aspect too, and
That's not the
balancing.
case.
I was doing a lot of reading about ethics and all of the challenges, and it's, I mean, if you think about it, that's why we're here. Because if you look at, okay, there's ethical things on both sides, there's privacy and there's disclosure. So, you know, and transparency. So where do we draw those lines? And I think that's the question, like, we said, okay, your financial disclosure forms will be completely confidential. And then we have, when we have an issue or something comes up, like you were saying, then what? Where does, and maybe you're the person to talk to about that. But like, where does the line get drawn around
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, maybe,
an advisory
It's
opinion?
just,
Because
there
that
are
will
some
disclose.
limits under FOIA for like interdepartment
yeah,
communications and like that, and certain personnel things.
Right.
So I think, you know, what would probably make a lot of sense is that when any opinion or any product is produced by the Board of Ethics to be delivered to the town board, my suggestion would be, the way that we do pretty much everything is that it goes through the town clerk. And then the town clerk has a file of all of those opinions,
Okay.
you know, all the different things that you guys can do.
Okay.
And with the understanding that if those are asked for from a FOIL perspective, that you would have the authority to redact things as per the attorney, so that the opinion itself
yeah, so that's what.
lives there with the clerk.
Where I was going, you
Yeah.
have to be able to scrub it of any personal identifying information before it's
And
public.
and there may even be an idea of, you know, you guys will produce an internal document that is transmitted, and then a public facing document. The Board of Ethics review made an advisory opinion on this topic.
Yeah.
With this general, you know, like,
Right.
that might be a good way to do it, because, I mean, there are gonna be people that if you guys do anything, residents are gonna wanna know.
Absolutely.
And they should,
Yeah,
They should know.
and they should know,
But again,
exactly.
scrub for any personally identifying, you know, like a personnel matter, same thing.
And that's, I think, too, part of the board reviewing this will be a deeper dive into exactly the implications of FOIA and everything like that, so that we can understand, because, you know, like, if everything is subject to FOIL, the confidentiality statement is mostly empty.
Almost smooth. Yeah, this was,
Yeah, that's
attorney
right.
Tessie did advise on that.
Yeah, so I think it's, but I do think the intent should be to protect people's privacy, but at the same time, like you were just saying, there has to be, like, if you guys render an opinion, it's gotta be publicly available.
Yeah, cause again,
Yeah.
this, if you won't say it, I will. So the whole point of
Oh, yeah.
this is, you know, to build
No.
trust with the public, you know, the whole.
Absolutely, and I'll say it all.
Yeah, please.
want,
Yeah, please give us the rundown.
I do, I mean, first of all, the question may arise, like, why would we need a board, right? Like, why do you need it? You've got the code. But I think that if you look at it from the perspective of how complex it gets, like what we're talking about, codes do require some interpretation. And when you are not making that conversation available, then that can break trust as much as having something available like this can build it, you know? And like I said before, not every situation is covered, you know, in a board of ethics. And so that is part of us just trying to create a system that would anticipate how to catch things like that. Obviously, people have competing values, and we may have, like we just talked about, several correct actions, but trying to decide how they're all balanced out with law and ethics and all of that. Having any kind of second look or second eyeballs on things can reassure the public that these things are open and you know, discussed. And the same thing goes about creating this culture of ethical reflection. You know, I think it really does help people see that that's happening, and being mindful about all of this, because like ethics go all the directions. And so not just, you know, helping you know, employees of the town to be seen in their role as being open and ethical, but also letting the public recognize that we're trying to protect all of that, you know? Everyone here is a person who lives in this town. So it's not just, you know, so I hope that made sense. I feel like I'm sort of talking in circles and saying the same thing, but these are important points because they do build or break trust.
Yeah.
Did I cover it?
You did, but so Christina and Larry have just been sort of incredibly generous with their time and energy and attention to this, and so I don't wanna squander all of their good work and not, you know, if you guys don't have the questions, I'll ask them for you.
Right, no, do it, please, I hope you do.
You know,
Well, we've been immersed in this.
we have
so-
been, you know, again, the questions about like, you know, doesn't an ethics code and requirements like this presume misconduct? And the answer to that is, of course, no, it prevents it, you know, fewer headaches for everyone in the long run. You know, what's the cost burden of this? Zero. These are volunteers right here, you know,
What?
They're so salary.
Now you told me.
Well, that's the end of us.
So I do think we need to touch on something because it will come up, it's come up in private conversations with me, the idea of, you know, won't this be used to target or shame people? You know, this is the question that came up.
How unethical.
How unethical would that be? That's a real concern, and we're committed to an approach that's educational, not punitive. This is a proactive board. We're rolling out policies and procedures in the midst of. We're not aware, we have no referrals, we're not aware of any scandals currently embroiling the town. It's more about fostering a culture of openness and not finger pointing. So that's the noble cause here, and we'll be, you know, putting our shoulders to the wheel to make that happen in this year.
I think the supervisor, after the first 6 months or a year, the one thing I would suggest that you might want to think about, many of the towns that we looked at start the process of a question through the town attorney office, because they have a full-time town attorney. The question comes into the town attorney, either from an employee, can I do this, or from a citizen, can this person do this? And then it's funneled straight to the Board of Ethics. You know, it's your call, Supervisor, about whether you really want to start with the board, the town board, for the first looks, the overview of a question or a concern or an allegation, quote unquote, as opposed to somebody else doing it. I can go either way, but the larger towns that have full-time attorneys use that function to funnel the questions that way, thereby avoiding sort of having the board make up their mind or finding out information before it gets to them. it's a hard call, but I mean, it's something you
I
may
think
wanna.
it's appropriate. I mean, the whole point here is trust and, and there's no reason that the board would necessarily need to review these as they come in when the attorney is, and more than likely, the attorney is going to be able to say, "I have this question before, here's the answer." Still pass it along to you guys, but
Yeah,
from an advisory standpoint, might be able to guide that person immediately.
Yeah.
And then, eventually hear back from the board.
And again, of course, we like to remind everybody that there's two separate questions. Is it legal versus is it ethical? It's not the same question.
exactly.
So there may be a back and forth between an attorney and a board of ethics
Yes.
in many cases.
And the other thing that what you just said about the attorney is there may be people that see it as a conflict of interest to give them to you to, it's
Yeah.
almost like taking away from the power of that, so.
We'll have to see how it works.
No.
Yeah, form follows function.
Yes, exactly. So we are, I'm not keeping an eye on the time very well, but we're heading close to our hour. I wanna just kind of make sure that we have a sense of what the future looks like. So again, your Board of Ethics stands ready, willing, and able to activate on any task set to us. We will be waiting for any revisions and town approval of the disclosures policy before we do any training or rollout. But once that happens, we are ready and able to go. Hopefully it'll be during the warm months, travel is easy. And also today's session should provide a little bit of just overview guidance to anybody who wants to check in and watch the tape, so to speak. And again, questions and inquiries do not go directly to the Board of Ethics, so it's why we included just a general information email for anybody who has questions about policy and procedure here, not reporting or making referrals. Again, I hope we've made it clear, all matters of that type should go directly to the board. They are your elected representatives. And
Or the attorney, are we thinking about?
Yeah, that'll probably be something that we shape up. I think what the plan would be is we'll present this at the next board meeting and then wait 2 meetings and then consider it to see if there's any time for feedback or any changes that folks are looking for. And then probably what we'll end up doing is before adoption, we'll figure out exactly what the language is of how, to round out the procedure to just say, this is the 3-step process of having something, make its way to the board of ethics. I think we can definitely make sure we put that on the policy too, so there's no questions as to
flesh out the
exactly,
referral process.
exactly how that's supposed to work.
Great.
Will the amendments to the code regarding the Board of Ethics and the Ethics Code be presented to the public with a public hearing?
So any changes to the code will require a public hearing. I don't believe policies and procedures need a public hearing, but I don't see why we wouldn't have one. It's just, not statutory to have one, but, and that's also too part of it. We present it, have a conversation at a meeting, and then give everybody at least a few months or a few weeks to digest it and get any of that feedback in. Because what we have found is if we just present something and then in 2 weeks move
Do it,
to consider it, it's difficult to get that feedback really, taken in.
I know it sounds ironic to say just trust us, but we're happy to present, on any changes and materials like in a format like this.
Yeah.
For sure.
Did that answer your question, Mary?
I don't, this is my first big meeting, so I'm very excited. That
This
was
is great, it's
Thank
nice
you
to
for
see
all
something
your
on
work,
paper, and I think the point of having something that is a good jumping off point.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So we can start building good habits, and then as we are able to take a look back and say, hey, maybe we can grab something from the 48-page code that'll address some of the issues that we're seeing that aren't being addressed.
Well, we absolutely, we
Yeah,
looked
we
at,
have
for example, the county code and pages of definitions, whereas Manlius code has, I think, 2 definitions. Person and interest. or
Yeah.
whatever.
Right,
And I
yeah.
know, having spoken about this with other attorney professionals, senior to senior, that was on purpose. The town of Manlius ethics code was deliberately minimalist.
Mhm.
And so
Hmm.
we are in a point here at a moment in the now present where we're revisiting that, maybe time to something more thorough.
Yeah.
Well, things are getting more complex, I think,
Indeed.
for municipal government, and it's good to have yourselves covered, by a clear code, with, definitions of, conflict of interest, and also a process for answering questions when they come up.
Absolutely, yeah, and at the very least, whether we can get to perfection in terms of the structure of policy and code is separate from the fact that we are bound and determined to get to an environment of compliance. So these are all efforts to get to an environment of, well, not only compliance, but full transparency and trust, public trust, that's the goal. So we bear with us as we shave and whittle away at perfecting policy and procedure, but know that the target is fixed, atmosphere and environment of full transparency and public trust. And I want to, as the town's elected appointee to this board, I want to specifically thank these two volunteers from the community who really just are giving their time and toil to this from now forevermore.
Until you let it stop. Thank you.
Well, if there's
It's my
no
pleasure.
other questions.
Well, I want to add to that briefly is I'm not sure, you didn't really say, these guys have been meeting for several months. Like this is not something you just dreamed up. So I think it's important for the people to realize that this has been, quite a process to even get to today. And now we're diving into a more public part of it. But this group has been working for some time.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Ballinger, and I also want to make sure to remind that this was really, although it's prompted by what is in our existing code, it was really compelled by public input. Members of the public came forward and said, I really think the town needs to move on this, and so we are.